Good evening. Referring to the scenario for Chloe, I'll be answering the 10 questions as asked in the assessment. The first question: define inclusion and diversity in the context of an early education and care setting. So, in the early childhood education and care settings, inclusion and diversity are two core educational concepts. This study first defines the connotation of inclusion. It guarantees that all children and families and educators receive value recognition and respect, free from limitations imposed by 7 categories of identity difference: cultural background, language, ability, gender, religion, socioeconomic status, and family structure. Inclusion allows all relevant groups to fully participate in every part of educational program and build a sense of belonging, and it requires educators to adjust the environment and curricula to fit learners rather than forcing children to adapt to the existing environment. The study then defines that diversity covers 9 categories of individual and group differences and put forward that diversity is core value adding resource that enriches learning experiences. To support this claim, it cites a conclusion from the Early Years Learning Framework that children can develop a strong sense of identity when their cultural and linguistic backgrounds are respected. Finally, taking Chloe, a child who recently migrated to Australia with Cantonese as her first language, as an example, the study clarifies that inclusion must ensure she gains acceptance and connection, while diversity requires recognizing her background as an important contribution to the learning community. The second question: explain the concept of cultural responsiveness in an early education setting. Um, Cultural responsiveness refers to the ability of educators to recognize, respect, and respond appropriately to the cultural identities, value, belief, languages, and experiences of children and families. Educators must understand the impact of culture on children's development and learning and communication patterns, as well as family practices. This approach moves beyond celebrating cultural festivals and instead embeds cultural understanding into everyday interactions, teaching practices, and decision making. In Chloe's case, a child from an immigrant family, as an example, cultural responsiveness would involve leveraging her Cantonese language resources to prepare translated material and arrange interpreters to advance homeschool collaboration. Practices of this kind help children feel accepted and valued and improve their sense of belonging, well being, and positive learning outcomes. Question number 3: what actions can an educator take to act ethically and support the inclusion of people from diverse backgrounds? All educators bear a professional responsibility to act ethically and promote inclusive practices. The core of ethical practice is to respect the dignity, right, and diversity of every individual and guarantee equal opportunities for people to participate in learning. Several actions can support inclusion: developing respectful partnership with families and recognizing parents as children first teachers, using culturally inclusive teaching resources that reflect diverse cultures, languages, abilities, and family structures, challenging stereotypes, prejudice, and discriminatory behavior when it occurs, providing equitable access to learning opportunities for all children, reflecting on personal biases and assumptions that may influence professional practice, supporting home languages alongside English language development, creating learning environment that celebrate diversity and foster belonging, engaging in ongoing professional learning related to cultural competence and inclusion. When working with the student Chloe, educators must value her Cantonese language proficiency, in immediately stop her peers from teasing her, support her communication needs, involve her family in relevant decision making processes, advocate for her rights and well being, and foster mutual respect among all children. Discuss how individual values, beliefs, and behaviors may lead an individual showing biases or discriminating against others. An individual's value, beliefs, and behaviors are shaped by four core factors: personal experience, family influence, cultural background, and social environment. These factors not only construct a person's sense of identity but may also give rise to unconscious bias. Prejudice is a judgment rooted in stereotypes rather than objective information. Unconscious bias is a cognitive bias that impacts interactions, expectation, and decision making without an individual's awareness. Discrimination is the unfair treatment that emerges when prejudice is translated into action. Widespread real-world scenarios include educators who require English to be used at all times, inadvertently discouraging children from using their native languages, and children learning prejudice from adults' negative assessment. This aligns with the case of Chloe, who was mocked by her peers because of her language. This behavior may stem from a limited understanding of cultural diversity or exposure to stereotypes. If such behavior is ignored, it can negatively affect Chloe's self-esteem, sense of belonging, and participation. Education professionals must reflect on their own values and beliefs, identify their hidden potential biases, and build environment that respect differences through self-awareness and professional reflection to achieve equity, respect, and inclusion in education. Next question, describe three positive impact of an educator displaying inclusive practice. Inclusive practice is highly valuable practice that delivers multiple positive gains for three groups: children, families, and educators. First, it helps children build a sense of belonging and identity. When learning environments center children's own cultures and experiences, for example, by acknowledging Chloe's unique upbringing, it cultivates self-confidence and positive self-esteem. Second, it supports positive social interaction, fosters empathy, reduces prejudice, and encourages mutual support among peers from different backgrounds. Inclusive environments reduce prejudice and encourage cooperation and understanding. Third, it improves learning outcomes. Children who feel secure engage actively in their learning, while educators build tailored learning experiences that leverage children's existing strengths. These positive outcomes advance children's long-term well-being, resilience, and academic success. How would you consider and build on the diverse background and strengths of all children, families, and educators at the service? Building on diversity begins with developing meaningful relationships and gaining an understanding of each individual's background, experiences, strength, and interest. Educators should gather information through enrollment process, conversations with families, observations, and ongoing collaboration. Strategies include encouraging families to share cultural tradition, languages, stories, and celebrations, incorporating multicultural resources, books, music, learning experiences into the curriculum, recognizing and valuing the professional and personal experiences of educators from diverse backgrounds, supporting children to share aspects of their identity and culture with peers, using children's interest and strength as foundations for learning experiences, displaying visual representations of diverse culture and family structures throughout the environment. To address the inclusion needs of Chloe, invite her family to the service to share her cultural customs, integrate Cantonese vocabulary into daily routines, provide supplementary Chinese reading material, and recognize her unique experiences. These strategies aim to foster inclusion and build connections between service and families. How could you support the engagement of Chloe in this scenario? To support Chloe, the child from the Cantonese background who is still developing her English proficiency, to integrate smoothly into the service, the educators must design targeted support strategies centered on four core domains: language barriers, social relationship, emotional health, and cultural inclusion. First, educators should build trust with Chloe and her family proactively, learn basic Cantonese to foster rapport, use visual teaching aids, gestures, photographs, picture schedules and translated resources to support her English language acquisition. Next, they should build peer connection through a buddy system and group activities and pair Chloe with empathetic language role models. Educators should also integrate diverse Chinese cultural material, songs, visual displays, and family photographs into the learning environment to strengthen their sense of belonging. They must regularly align their support approaches with both the service and Chloe's family to access personalized information about her, like Chloe's interests, strength, routine, and communication preferences. They must intervene immediately in any exclusionary behavior like teasing or exclusion and promote diversity, respect, and kindness to ultimately help Chloe build self confidence, boost her participation, and strengthen her sense of belonging. The next question, how can inclusive practices be implemented for all educators at this service? For early childhood education services to implement inclusive practices, the core prerequisite is educators' continuous reflection and professional learning. Educators' attitude, implicit assumptions, and daily behavior directly impact the service experiences for children and their families. The service should implement several strategies. Regular reflective practice session where educators examine personal beliefs and biases, professional development focusing on cultural competence and anti-bias education, inclusive practice, team discussions about diversity, equity, and respectful communication, critical reflection on policies, procedures, and learning environment to identify barriers, seeking feedback from families regarding their experiences within the service. When engaging with Chloe and her family, educators must build respectful, culturally sensitive, family-centered communication, avoid unconscious biases, and establish trust to support the child's well-being and learning. Provide a reflection statement that represents how you position yourself regarding diversity and inclusion within the early childhood education and care setting. As an educator, I view diversity as a core, invaluable strength that enriches learning communities and benefits all children. I recognize that every child, family, colleague brings unique experiences, knowledge, languages, values, and perspective that should be respected and celebrated. Building on in perspective, I clarified the true connotation of inclusive education. It is far more than merely children's physical participation in the early childhood setting. Through inclusive practice, I aim to promote empathy, social justice, and respect for diversity while supporting every child's sense of belonging, well-being, and success. What strategies would you implement to address bullying within the service? First, deliver unified, clear expectations for respectful behavior and teach the values of kindness, empathy, fairness, inclusion through intentionally designed teaching experiences. Second, respond to the incidents of teasing and exclusion the moment they occur to build children to understand the negative impacts of their actions on others. Third, embed anti-bias curricula across all programs and use diverse formats to dismantle stereotype and foster recognition of diversity. In the case of Chloe, who was teased for her language use, the teasing behavior must be stopped immediately. The value of all languages must be explained, and learning experiences that celebrate multilingualism and cultural diversity would further support children's understanding and acceptance of differences. Creating a culture of respect, empathy, inclusion helps prevent bullying and ensures all children feel safe, valued, and supported within the service.